this article was about the software companies again. I should have mentioned that with the Microsoft stuff. And it's basically, I mean, you got this flim-flam guy here with the mustachio, the greased mustache, and he's selling software basically. A lot of the software that I see in schools, it's got a ton of glitz. It doesn't have much substance. It doesn't teach kids in a way that the teachers can't already teach them. There was another example. Papert was observing a classroom, and this one particular kid kept getting reprimanded by the teacher for not finishing the problems correctly. He apparently discovered that the sounds and the images that popped up when he failed to get the correct answer were more entertaining to him than when he got the right answer. And so he was choosing, actually, to do the wrong thing just because of the reward that he was getting from it. I've actually noted that a lot of computer programs are getting better about that, where if you get something right, there's a lot more fanfare, and if you get something wrong, it's just a really quiet little buzz. And this is a good way to do things like that. There's a bunch of resources. I already mentioned a Biblio. There's Python for Fun. CP4E is actually computer programming for everyone. I don't know if any of you program in Python, but Guido van Rossum developed it using ABC, a language, a teaching language, as a template. And he never intended for Python to be a teaching language per se. He meant for it to be more functional, but he got so many letters from people who hadn't even discovered ABC at the time that Python was a very effective tool in their classrooms that he began this project, which is the Computer Programming for Everyone project. There's a public knowledge website. There's also Open Government, which I didn't put on here. Think Python and Wikipedia. I think we've all used Wikipedia by now, and that's just growing at a phenomenal rate. This is a good place to find information on the actual productivity of using computers in the classroom. The MAC Foundation, MacArthur Foundation, spends a lot of money making sure that computers in classrooms are effective and measuring which ones are, which ones aren't. And this is the website for them. A lot of those reports are publicized on the web. I forget this exact report. I think she's another student of Papert, Dr. Margaret Kirkwood. Almost all of them, Papert was Piaget's finest protege, and after him, almost everyone has come from that school at MIT, plus a few at Carnegie Mellon, I think. And the network guy, Vladis, that was here a couple nights ago, I'd love to see. There's a website called Math Genealogy, or Genealogy of Math, Genealogy Tree, and it shows how all the mathematicians are interrelated, like currently living ones or recently dead ones, how they all interrelated. And yeah, I think that's all of it. So, any questions? Any criticism? Because I hope to give this at some other time. I needed a lot of slurring. I just printed these notes today. Just got this computer at the beginning of the week because I couldn't stand the idea of doing this on Microsoft Windows.
I wanted to go back to a real general note. In Michigan, how's this? Okay. On a real general note, in Michigan, there's been this Laptops in Schools initiative where they're spending a great deal of taxpayer money putting laptops or threatening to put laptops into middle schoolers' hands. And, you know, on its face, that's not such a bad idea. You know, kids should have computers to play with. But what I see wrong with the problem, or wrong with the program, is that they then rely on these machines. They can't take them apart. They can't mess with the software. They can't, you know, do a lot of programming and things like that, because if they screw it up, well, now they can't do their classwork and so on. And, you know, a mechanic has two cars. There's the daily driver and the project car. And if you expect kids to learn how a computer works, that can't be the one they depend on. And that's what I see so many, you know, computers and kids programs screwing up, is they say, simultaneously, you should learn all sorts of things about this machine, but don't you dare play with it because you might break it. I was wondering if you could comment on that.
Definitely. There is a lot of research that suggests that it may be a waste of taxpayers' money even if they don't ruin the computer. And even at Cleveland State, I mean, the kids aside, even in Cleveland State, they've got a computer loan area. And I noticed some kids going back weekly, basically to get their hard drives re-imaged. I don't think they have that problem if they're using something besides Windows, but they might. I mean, they can screw that up too, I suppose, especially if they're developing. But I almost think that that's the point of having any tool, and especially if you're going to send it home with a kid where he's going to work with this thing in private, he's going to want to play with it. I would encourage them to take it apart and ruin it for the most part. The One Laptop Per Child project that Negroponte sponsored underwent a lot of criticism. There's still debate whether it's going to work or not. For anyone who isn't familiar with it, they're looking to sell laptops to third world countries at $100 a pop for the most part. Now, the initial countries that got involved, like Brazil, Nigeria, and a few others, they're actually paying more like $175, $200 for these things. All of the politics aside, whether it's right or wrong, I see merit in it. I see some things that are a little bit hazardous, but those things are designed to be basically wrecked. They've got a reset button on the bottom, just like your PDA does, which is going to reset that thing from flash. They can do whatever they want with this. They can take it apart a million different ways, ruin it a million different ways, and just reset it. You know?
Okay, back again. And in that respect, they're very much like the computers that I think we in the room learned on. Our generation, started with the Commodore 64 and the Apple II, where there wasn't a hard drive. You turned it back on, and it was back to its new state.
Or a tape.
Yeah, okay, Sinclair. Yeah. But that general era of machine was a lot more forgiving. It was much harder to screw it up. You had to have a screwdriver to do any lasting damage to that machine, and of course I did. But I learned.
Well, see, back in those days, it's interesting. Now, it could be that just the people that are in this room are the ones that were able to fix those computers when they ruined them, which is why we're all here today. And the people that broke them never got another one, probably, and they're not here.
but I think that people.
But the other aspect might be that there was no one then to criticize what you did with the computer. Teachers had no idea. They still barely have an idea. They just want you to treat the laptops they give you gently, So we did a lot of hacking in those days.
But I wonder if is there something about modern machines and modern, complicated OSs, the kids getting their drives re-imaged every week, is there something that simply you can't learn the way we did on modern machines?
Well, I would think so. As a systems programmer about 10 years ago, computers have gotten very, very complex. I think at this point, there's probably very few hackers that know the entire system. Like I used to know the entire interrupt, all the interrupts for the DOS operating system, for instance. I can't do that stuff anymore. Systems are too heavy. There's too many applications, too many mechanisms for communications. And that's good in a way, but you're not going to be good at all of them. So I think that that's an advantage, because now if I don't have an interest in GUIs, I can still work on transport layer stuff. But if I don't like the low-level stuff, I can work on the GUIs. That code is there now, and it's better documented, and it's easier to work with. Well, the One Laptop Per Child, for instance, the entire thing, even the file system, is written in Python. So when the machine crashes, you see a stack trace. You get to see exactly what happened, and you can reprogram the file system. So,
do you think there might be some merit to simple machines like that, whether they be a lab full of retro Commodores and Apples, or a lab full of One Laptop Per Child hardware here in the U.S.?
Sure.
Simply because it's easier to see how it works.
Well, I'd like to take anything and see how it works. I mean, when you dissect a frog, you're like working just on his respiratory system one day, or just on his whatever the next day. I think that you would need to focus on something in order to gain much out of it at all. But we still have those niche markets, or even niche interests today. We've got people that just do embedded programming. Now, it's not something I do. I'm not accustomed to a 4K barrier, but there's people that get off on that, and they're involved in projects that are always on something small, a single application running on a very small device. So I would think it's just up to your own interests. It's good that there's a variety that there is today. Not everyone wants to write assembler programs anymore.
Do you teach? Are you teaching currently?
No, I went back after I got laid off from BP. The year after that, I started in the there's a master's program, an accelerated master's program at Cleveland State, and I just started that. Decided this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, and the weekend before my finals, I got calls from 3 companies after being unemployed for a year. So I bit the bullet, went back to work for the man, and tried to pay off the mortgages so that I can go and become a teacher and not have to worry about mortgages. So.
It's been a while since I was in high school, but from what I understand, the district I went to is doing the same thing, where they threaten to suspend students who, in a programming class, write a program that was not specifically requested to be written by the teacher. What would you recommend can be done to try and convince a district to change policies like this, that restrict the ability of students to reasonably play around with the system in a class where they're expected to be, a class other people would expect them to be able to do stuff like that?
Not citing tons of material in this thing was tough enough for me to do, but that question will even be more difficult to answer in a politically correct way. I've always been a bit of a rebel. In religious classes, I would, if I disagreed with the teachers, I'd frequently fail the test on purpose. And it's just as difficult to get a 0 as it is to get 100. So I would personally recommend a walkout of the students. I'd refuse to program under those circumstances. I don't even call that programming in that case. In terms of doing something effective, though, if a walkout wouldn't be effective, I don't know how many students are involved. I don't know. I would bring in my own laptop. Or I'd write a program that isn't on the computer. And if the teacher says, you know, well, that's not the assignment, you can say, well, you can show them that it is. It produces the same output. I mean, that's the wonderfully expressive thing about computer science that you can't do in mathematics. You can express yourself. It's almost an art form. So you could write it in a different language or using a different algorithm. So he could do that, show the professor that it works, show that the output is exactly the same, black box methodology of programming, and say, if the teacher wants, since I wasn't permitted to do it on the computer, you run this, you know, at your own leisure, make sure that make sure that the output's exactly as you expected, and if it is, I deserve the A.
Well,
I'd
okay.
say that.
It wasn't a matter of your program had to be written the same way. It was you had to only be working on creating a program that creates the output you're supposed to.
Right.
So if I finish the program early, I can't go and work on a separate program that I want for myself. But the other part of this question was, as someone who is out of school, someone who's graduated from college already and is back living in the same district again, what can I do as a community member to try and convince them?
Wow, I didn't even know
Other
things
than-
like that existed. It sounds kind of draconian, but
Yeah.
I'd say talk to Strickland. I would bet he's got an open ear for stuff like this, especially since we want to make Ohio like
this
a
is
technology hub.
Michigan.
Oh, who's your governor? I don't know. What are his propensities?
It's a district thing, and it's not
Yeah,
a school board.
and I'll
thing.
bet the
So
governor
you
doesn't
can't
have
vote the
say.
people out. It's the administrators in the school that you can't. You have no way of doing other than complaining to them about them.
Yeah. How about like Google Summer of Code? You could do your own like district-wide Summer of Code. Take all the lesson plans that the teacher had during the year and have them complete those like in a day just to show the prof up. I don't know. I mean, if the teachers were to rebel against that curriculum, and I can't fathom. I'd love to see the documentation. I mean, even though I definitely have my opinions, I'd have to think that they at least thought they had a good reason for doing that, because that seems awfully restrictive. Well, and that's been the case. Well, and they're scared of technology. I mean, like we were just talking about. Now, your parents, you know, if you sit down at your parents' computer, they're going to worry about it. Now, I've got a junker that Oscar can use. He still wants the newest. You know, I just bought this a week ago, and this is all he can think about now. So he can't eat on it, and he knows that. You know, but if you teach your kids respect, you know, within limits, and accidents happen. You know, definitely. How much stuff did I break when I was a kid? Ton. Exactly. That's Dad. Stuff he'd bring home from work, I would just completely disassemble. I don't know.
Being an ex-teacher in Ohio School District, I found that, actually, and also in Illinois, it went for both in inner city Chicago and in the rural country school. Um,